Starting with the great name of Allah, the most merciful and beneficial. Assalamu alaikum friends. My name is Sayyida OMAMA SHAH and today we will be discussing the brain. So without delay, let's start. Here you can see the major portion of the brain, forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. Forebrain divided into telencephalon, which is further divided into olfactory bulbs and the cerebrum, and the diencephalon, which is further divided into thalamus and hypothalamus. We have here the cerebrum. This cerebrum is the largest portion of the brain, present in the cranial cavity, divided into two cerebral hemispheres by longitudinal fissure. The two cerebral hemispheres is connected by a bridge of white matter called the corpus callosum. Here is the corpus callosum. It connects the two cerebral hemispheres and transfers the memory on one side of the cerebral hemisphere to the other side. The surface of the cerebrum is called as the cerebral cortex. The cortex is divided into anterior and posterior by the central sulcus. The sulcus are depression. When the sulci are large enough, they divide the cerebrum into lobes. The gyri are the fold of the cerebral hemisphere. The lobes are here, you can see, are given different names. It depends on the bone that overlie them. The frontal lobe is overlaid by the frontal, parietal lobe by parietal bone, occipital and temporal by occipital and temporal bones. You should be well aware of the location of these lobes. So the frontal lobe is anterior to the central and above to the lateral sulcus. Here is the lateral sulcus. The parietal lobe is posterior to the central and above to the lateral sulcus, while the parieto-occipital sulcus divide the parietal lobe and occipital lobe. So you may say that the occipital lobe is posterior to the parieto-occipital sulcus. The two folds, precentral gyrus and postcentral gyrus, are formed by the central sulcus, anteriorly and posteriorly. The precentral gyrus is also called as the motor area and it is responsible for the movement of the body on the opposite side of the body. The postcentral gyrus is also known as the sensory area and this is responsible for the sensation of touch, pain, temperature, etc. Here you can see the Broca area responsible for production of speech, the Wernicke area understanding speech. Here is the superior temporal lobe and in the middle you can see the auditory area. Here is the calcarine sulcus and in the calcarine sulcus is the visual area which is responsible for sight. Now we have finished the cerebrum. Now let's discuss the diencephalon. You know that the diencephalon has two parts, the thalamus and hypothalamus. Thalamus lies posterior to the hypothalamus, while the hypothalamus lies anterior to the thalamus. The thalamus is responsible for the relay station between the body and the cerebrum, while the hypothalamus is responsible for hormonal regulation. Both of these, hypothalamus and thalamus, make the diencephalon. The brainstem is formed by the midbrain, pons medulla oblongata of the hindbrain. Alhamdulillah friends, we have finished the forebrain. Now let's discuss the midbrain. So above the midbrain is the forebrain while below is the hindbrain. You may say that the midbrain is the relay station between the hindbrain and the forebrain above. The midbrain has two lateral halves called the cerebral peduncles. Each of the cerebral peduncle has anterior part and posterior part. The anterior part is called as the cerebral crus while the posterior part is called as the tegmentum. The cerebral crus is separated from the tegmentum by substantia nigra, which is the band of pigments. Here you can see a cavity. This cavity is called as the cerebral aqueduct. The cerebral aqueduct connects the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. Posterior to the cerebral aqueduct is the tectum. The tectum has four swelling. Now let's see the tectum in the next figure. Here you can see the four swelling in the tectum. The superior are called the superior colliculi and the inferior colliculi. Between the superior colliculi is a pineal gland. and anterior to the tectum is the tegmentum, which is the posterior part of the midbrain. Now finish the midbrain. Now starting the hindbrain. It has three parts: pons, cerebellum, and the medulla oblongata. Hindbrain is composed of three parts: the pons, medulla oblongata, and the cerebellum. The pons lies anterior to the cerebellum. Above pons is the midbrain. Below pons is the medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata is a cone-shaped structure. Medially or anteriorly, it forms a fissure called the anterior fissure or the median fissure. At each side of this anterior fissure are the swellings called the pyramid. Below the pyramid are the olive. Downward, pyramid tapers, and here the descending nerve cross at the other side and form decussation. Now the last part of the hindbrain, the cerebellum. The cerebellum has two cerebellar hemispheres, and that cerebellar hemisphere is connected by vermis. The cerebellar surface is called as the cortex. The folds are called as the folia, and the folia is separated by transverse fissures. The cerebellum has cerebellar peduncles. The superior cerebellar peduncle communicates the cerebellum with the midbrain. The middle cerebellar peduncle communicate or connect the cerebellum to the pons, and the inferior cerebellar peduncle connect the cerebellum to the medulla oblongata. Here you can see a mass of grey matter embedded in the white matter. These masses are the fastigial nucleus, globose nucleus, emboliform nucleus, and the dentate nucleus. Among them, the largest one is the dentate nucleus. Thanks for watching. If you like my video, so subscribe to my channel. Allah Hafiz.